Hey everybody, KC here. So the other day when my Mrs. Content Guy and I were up in Cape Cod, we were going out one morning for coffee. It was a little local coffee shop, and that shop had actually sort of adjusted the way they did business because of the pandemic, and they had moved all of their service operations outside. And it was a little confusing about where to go and where you're supposed to line up to get coffee. But I figured it out, and at one point I was standing there, and these other people were there, and they were clearly confused. They weren't quite sure where they should get online. So I was helpful. I told them. And Mrs. Content Guy took me aside afterwards and said, you know, you're just like the people in that Progressive commercial, right? You know, you don't have to help everybody. You don't have to just insinuate yourself into their business. Let them figure it out themselves. That's what you did. Now, there's a part of me that was a little offended by this. I mean, I was just trying to be helpful, right? But I also sort of, you know, I laughed. Because, you know, I think those Progressive commercials are pretty funny, you know, where the guy is trying to help people not become their parents once they buy a house. Although, after I thought about it for a little bit, I realized, you know, just in terms of age, I'm actually not those people in this scenario. I'm actually the parents they don't want the people to be like. That's how old I am. But I sort of laughed it off. And then, though, I was reading a story in Los Angeles magazine that made me think about the whole thing differently. And basically what the story talked about was getting older, how getting older in America is a drag. That's what the story said. It always has been. But in recent years, even as life expectancy and quality of life have improved, it's become a depressing and isolating slide down a demographic sinkhole. All over the nation, in just about every business, from tech to media to manufacturing, boomers and Gen Xers are being squeezed out of the picture. Poor Gen Xers. Corporations are culling them from their payrolls. Hollywood is writing them off the screen. Advertising is completely ignoring or humiliating them. Ageism has become the last socially acceptable form of discrimination, with over 50s being shoved onto ice floes and sent drifting into cultural irrelevancy. It says the most common images of older people on TV are the dithering geezers popping pills and dialing big numbered cell phones in the commercials. The most blatantly ageist ads are easy to spot, like the Progressive ones, in which Dr. Rick counsels young homeowners on how not to turn into their embarrassingly old parents who can't pronounce the word quinoa or figure out how to open a PDF file. Well, it's funny, when I read that story, it made me think differently about those Progressive commercials, and a little bit differently about ageism, right? And wondering all of a sudden if somehow I was a victim of this. The fact of the matter is, I know how to pronounce quinoa. I know how to open a PDF file. I know how to create a PDF file. Now, there are some limits to what I know how to do that young people know better than I do. On the other hand, I know how to drive a stick shift, and I don't think there are a lot of young people today who do. It was interesting, last week when Michael Sansolo and I did our bigger picture about baseball, one of the things we meant to talk about, and it didn't come up though, was the fact that, you know, the San Francisco Giants, one of the best teams in baseball, if not the best team in baseball, also happens to be the oldest team in baseball. They have a lot more experience. They've been there before most of these players. Now, it helps that they're all having career years, but the fact of the matter is they're bringing a lot of experience to the field. One of the things it also says in this story in LA Magazine is another reason older people aren't more positively portrayed in the entertainment and advertising businesses is hardly any of those people are actually working those industries. Well, that's also interesting because think about it. How many older people are really working in retail? Is there a rush to youth where businesses are saying, hey, listen, you know, we don't necessarily need those older people there, in part because they're going to cost us more money. Well, listen, I think there's a lot of talent and experience that older people can bring to the party. They know how to socialize better. They're used to having conversations with people as opposed to communicating on their phones. You know, listen, like the San Francisco Giants, I'd like to think that we're all capable of having career years. Even if we're pursuing different careers or pursuing something that's not really a career after we've had our careers. You know, I'll put a link to the story below. Get past the part where it talks about the woes of Polina Potoskova, who's a supermodel who at age 56 is suddenly finding she's invisible and is having a little hard time dealing with it. The story actually makes some compelling points about age, and we ought to pay attention. Younger folks ought to pay attention because it ought to make them feel different about their elders, and people our age ought to need to think about it because, quite frankly, we ain't done yet. And we have a lot left to bring to the party, and I don't think this is the time to put us out to pasture. Really, really interesting story. I hope you enjoy it too. That's what's on my mind this morning, and as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.